the far northeast of Venezuela, where the Orinoco River breaks apart into more than 60 channels before emptying into the Atlantic Ocean, there is a place called the Delta Amacuro. It is one of the largest river deltas on Earth, 25,000 square kilometers of swamp, mangrove forest, and black water. The water is what you notice first. It is not blue. It is not green. The rivers of the Orinoco Delta are black, not dark, black. The tannins from millions of decaying leaves stain the water so deeply that you cannot see more than a few centimeters beneath the surface. You could put your hand into the water up to your wrist, and your fingers would disappear completely. The rivers look like liquid obsidian, like ink, like the earth is bleeding something very old and very dark. There are no roads in the delta, no bridges, no paths through the jungle. The only way to move is by water, by canoe, through a maze of channels that twist and fork and dead end and reconnect in ways that no GPS can fully map. If you don't know where you're going, you don't come out. The Warao have lived here for over 8,000 years. Their name means the boat people, because the canoe is not transportation for the Warao. It is life itself. Their children learn to swim before they learn to walk. Their houses are built on stilts above the water, palafitos, with floors made of split palm wood and roofs of woven thatch. There are no walls. The jungle presses in on every side, and below every house, every room where they sleep, every floor where their children play, there is nothing but the black water. Always moving, always there. The Warao don't fear the jungle. They don't fear the snakes or the caimans or the piranhas. They've lived alongside those things for thousands of years. What the Warao fear is the water at night, not the rivers, not the channels they travel every day. They fear the caños muertos, the dead channels, the places where the water stops flowing, where the current dies and the surface goes perfectly still. Like glass, like a black mirror. The Warao have a belief that is very old, older than the missionaries, older than the Spanish. They believe that the world is a thin crust of earth, floating on an infinite sea, and in that sea, beneath the water, there is another world, a world that looks exactly like ours, but it is not ours. The dead live there, and sometimes, especially when the water is still especially when the moon is gone, the boundary between the two worlds becomes thin enough to hear through. They have a word for what lives on the other side. They call it Hebu, an ancestor spirit, something that was once human, but is not human anymore. And the Hebu do one thing. They call your name. From below the water, in voices you recognize, in voices you love. The Warao have an ancient story about the origin of death. At the beginning of the world, the chief of the Warao told his people, "Tonight, two voices will call to you. The first voice is death. Do not answer it. The second voice is life. Answer only the second voice, and you will live forever." That night, one young man fell asleep. He woke to a voice calling his name. Confused, half dreaming, he answered the first call. And because of that, every person who has ever lived has had to die. The Warao believe that the first call still echoes, that it never stopped, that it travels through the water, through every river and channel in the delta, and that it is still looking for people to answer. The rule is absolute. If you hear a voice from the water at night, you do not answer. You do not look down. And if the water beneath your house goes still, perfectly still, when it should be moving, you cover your ears, you close your eyes, and you wait for the sun, because the dead are patient, and the water is always there. These are 3 accounts from people who looked down. The first story was sent to me by a man named Jürgen. He was 43 at the time, a documentary filmmaker from Hamburg, and he had been commissioned to shoot a short film about the ecosystem of the Orinoco Delta. He flew into Tucupita, the small capital of the Delta Amacuro state, and from there traveled by motorized canoe with a local guide named Raphael for 3 days into the interior. Jürgen told me that nothing in his 30 years of filming prepared him for the delta, the scale of it, the density of the vegetation, the way the channels narrowed until the canopy closed overhead and the light dropped to almost nothing. And the water. He said the water was the most unsettling thing he had ever seen. Not because it was dirty, because it was opaque. Because you could be floating on 3 meters of water and have absolutely no idea what was beneath you. Raphael was Warao, late 50s, quiet. He navigated the channels from memory. No map. No GPS. He seemed to know every turn, every fork, every sandbar. He spoke some Spanish, less English. But he understood everything. On the second day, Jürgen asked Raphael to take him into one of the narrower side channels, a canoe that branched off from the main waterway into denser jungle. He wanted aerial shots of the canopy and close-ups of the water's surface for a sequence about the delta's unique chemistry. Raphael hesitated. He said something in Warao that Jürgen didn't understand. Then, in Spanish, "No es un caño vivo, es un caño muerto." It's not a living channel, it's a dead channel. Jürgen didn't understand the distinction. Raphael explained slowly, choosing his words carefully. Living channels flow, the water moves. Dead channels are places where the water stops, where nothing flows in or out. The water sits. It becomes perfectly still. Los Warao no entran ahí. The Warao don't go there. Jürgen pushed. He said it would only take 30 minutes. He promised they wouldn't go far. Raphael looked at the water for a long time. Then he agreed. But he said one thing before they turned into the channel. No mires el agua. Don't look at the water. The dead channel was narrow, maybe 4 meters across. The trees on either side leaned inward until their branches met overhead, forming a tunnel of green. The air was thick, hot, completely still. No wind, no current. The water beneath the canoe was motionless. Absolutely motionless. Not the gentle stillness of a calm river. The absolute stillness of water that has not moved in a very long time. The surface was so flat that it reflected the canopy above like a perfect mirror. Jürgen said it felt like they were floating between 2 identical forests, one above and one below. He set up his camera on a small tripod mounted to the bow of the canoe. He began filming the water's surface, close-up shots, the way the trees reflected, the way his own silhouette appeared on the black glass below. After about 10 minutes, he reviewed some of the footage on the camera's playback screen. He saw something in the water. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, a distortion in the reflection. He rewound and played the clip again. In the footage, beneath the reflection of the canopy, there was a shape. It was pale. It was below the surface, not on it. And it had a form that was unmistakably a face. Not his face. Not Raphael's face. A different face. Looking up, Jürgen felt his skin go cold. He turned and looked at the water beside the canoe. The surface was still, perfectly still. The dark mirror reflected the trees, the sky, his own shape leaning over the edge. And then, in the water, maybe half a meter below the surface, he saw it. Eyes, open, unblinking, looking up at him from beneath the black water. Not floating, not dead. Looking, the way a living person looks at you when they want your attention. The face was pale, almost gray, and it was smiling. A small, patient smile. Jürgen grabbed Raphael's arm. He pointed at the water. Raphael didn't look. He didn't lean over. He grabbed the paddle and drove it into the water hard, shattering the surface, and began paddling backward out of the channel. Fast. Violently. The canoe rocked. Water splashed over the sides. Jürgen looked at the water one more time as they pulled away. There were more faces now, not one, many, dozens, all just below the surface, all looking up, all smiling that same small, patient smile. Men, women, some that looked very old, some that didn't. The faces didn't follow the canoe. They stayed in place, suspended in the black water, watching, as if they had always been there, as if they had been waiting for someone to finally look down. Raphael didn't speak for the rest of the day. That night, in the camp on a raised wooden platform, Jürgen tried to ask him about what they had seen. Raphael said only one thing. They weren't looking at you. They were counting you. He wouldn't explain what that meant. Jürgen told me he reviewed all the footage that night. The faces were there, in every clip, in every frame shot inside that dead channel. Faces beneath the surface, some closer than others, some with their mouths open, as if they were speaking. He deleted all the footage from the dead channel. He said he didn't want to keep it. He said looking at the footage felt like looking at the water itself, and he was afraid that if he looked long enough, the faces would start to recognize him back. The second story comes from a couple, Daniel and Inez. He was Brazilian, a marine biologist from Manaus. She was Colombian, an ecologist specializing in freshwater dolphin populations. They were conducting a field study on river dolphin behavior in the lower Orinoco Delta, tagging and tracking the animals through the channel system. They had been in the delta for 11 days. Their base was a floating research platform, a wooden structure about 4 meters by 6 meters, anchored to mangrove roots in a wide, slow-moving channel. The platform sat about half a meter above the water level. They slept in hammocks strung under a tarp roof. Below them, through the gaps between the planks, the black water moved. The work was going well. They had tagged 3 dolphins. Their tracking equipment was functioning. The weather was cooperating. Inez told me that by the 11th night, she had grown accustomed to the sounds of the delta, the frogs, the insects, the occasional splash of a caiman sliding into the water, the gentle knock of the current against the platform's underside. That night, the 11th night, she woke up at approximately 2 in the morning. She lay in her hammock for a few seconds, listening. Daniel was asleep in the hammock next to hers. The tarp above them shifted slightly in a breeze she couldn't feel. The frogs were singing, the insects were buzzing. Everything was normal, except the water. The water was silent. Inez had spent 11 nights on this platform. She knew the sound of the current, the constant low murmur of water pushing against wood. It was always there. It was the baseline sound of her entire existence in the delta. She had stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing the hum of a refrigerator in your kitchen. It was gone. She lay very still. She listened. The frogs were there. The insects were there. But beneath the platform, nothing. No current. No movement. The water had stopped. She reached down from her hammock and touched the planks of the platform with her fingertips. They were dry. Earlier, when she had fallen asleep, there had been a thin film of moisture on the wood from the river spray. Now, dry. She looked through the gap between 2 planks, straight down into the water. The water was still, perfectly still. A flat black mirror less than half a meter below her. In the faint starlight filtering through the canopy, she could see her own face reflected in it. Her eyes, her hair hanging down. And then something knocked on the bottom of the platform. Not a bump, not a fish hitting wood. A knock. 3 deliberate, evenly spaced knocks from directly beneath her. Knock, knock, knock. The way a person knocks on a door. Inez stopped breathing. She stared down through the gap. The water was still. Her reflection stared back at her. Nothing moved. Then it knocked again. 3 more knocks. Slower this time. More deliberate, as if whatever was knocking wanted her to understand. This was not an accident. This was not an animal. This was a request. She woke Daniel. He heard it too. They lay in their hammocks, looking at each other in the dark, and they listened. The knocking continued. Every 30 seconds, 3 knocks. Always 3. Always from directly beneath the center of the platform. Always with the same slow, patient rhythm. Daniel whispered, "It's a cayman. It's bumping the platform." Inez shook her head. She whispered back, "Caymans don't knock in patterns." After about 20 minutes, the knocking stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Inez told me that in that silence, she became aware of something she hadn't noticed before. Breathing. Something beneath the platform was breathing. Long, slow, wet breaths. Inhale, 2 seconds. Exhale. Inhale, 2 seconds. Exhale. The sound was coming from directly below them, from the water, from beneath the surface of the water. Something was breathing underwater. Daniel sat up in his hammock. He reached for his headlamp. Inez grabbed his wrist and said, "Don't." He stopped. They sat there in the dark, listening to whatever was below them. Breathe. Then the breathing changed. It shaped itself into something. Not words, not exactly, but a rhythm that sounded like speech. A low, wet murmuring, as if someone submerged in water was trying to talk, trying to form syllables through liquid. The sound was thick and wrong, and it carried a tone of patience, of something that had been trying to say this for a very long time, and was finally close enough to be heard. The murmuring lasted for about 5 minutes. Then it stopped. The silence stretched. Inez counted to 60 in her head. Then again. Then again. Then the current came back. She heard the water begin to move against the platform's supports, the gentle knock of the river, the murmur of flowing water. The baseline sound returned as if someone had pressed play. The frogs, which she now realized had gone silent at some point during the knocking, began singing again. Neither of them slept. At dawn, Daniel dove under the platform to check the anchoring. The mangrove roots were fine, the platform was secure, the water was flowing normally, but on the underside of the planks, directly beneath the spot where they slept, the wood was different. It was lighter in color, smoother, as if something had been pressing against it, rubbing against it, for hours. And in the center of the smooth patch, Inez told me this is what she cannot stop thinking about. There were marks, small, shallow grooves carved into the wood. Not scratches, not random. The grooves formed shapes, letters, crude, but legible. 2 words, in Spanish. Déjame entrar. Let me in. They left the Delta that afternoon. They abandoned the research platform. They never went back. Daniel told me one more thing. He said that for 3 weeks after they returned to Manaus, every night, at approximately 2 in the morning, he would wake up, and in the silence of his apartment, 400 kilometers from the nearest river, he could hear 3 knocks. Faint, distant, but there. He moved to São Paulo 2 months later. The knocking stopped. He told me he doesn't live near water anymore. He chose his apartment specifically because it is on the 14th floor of a concrete building in the center of the city, as far from water as he could get. He said it didn't matter. He said sometimes when the apartment is very quiet and he's lying in bed and the air conditioning hums just right, he can still hear the breathing. The third story is the reason I made this video. It was sent to me by a woman named Valentina. She is Venezuelan, from Caracas, and the events she described happened when she was 29. Valentina's mother was Warao. Her father was Criollo, a mestizo from the city. They met when her father was working on a government infrastructure project in the Delta in the early 90s. Her mother left the Delta. They moved to Caracas. They had Valentina, and her mother, slowly, stopped talking about where she came from. Valentina grew up knowing almost nothing about the Warao side of her family. She knew her grandmother still lived in the Delta. She knew her mother had a sister who had stayed behind. She knew the name of the village, or the settlement. A cluster of palafitos on a wide channel in the lower Delta, near the coast, where the river meets the Atlantic. But she had never been there. Her mother died when Valentina was 5. The official cause was drowning. Her mother had been visiting the Delta alone, the first time she had gone back in years, and she was found face down in a dead channel 2 kilometers from the settlement. Her canoe was nearby, undamaged. She was a woman who had grown up on the water, a woman who could swim before she could walk. Valentina's father never discussed the details. He remarried. They didn't go to the Delta. The Warao side of the family became a silence in their home, a door that stayed closed. When Valentina was 29, her grandmother sent a message through a relative in Tucupita. A short message. "Come before I die. There is something you need to know about your mother." Valentina went. The journey from Tucupita into the lower delta took 6 hours by motorized canoe. The channel narrowed. The jungle closed in. The water changed color, from brown to dark amber to black. By the time they reached the settlement, the sun was low and the light had turned golden and strange. The settlement was small, 8 or 9 palafitos arranged along both sides of the channel, wooden houses on stilts, thatch roofs, no walls, just open platforms above the water with hammocks and cooking areas. Children swimming in the river, dogs sleeping on the walkways, the sound of a radio playing somewhere. Her grandmother's house was at the far end of the settlement, the last palafito before the channel curved and disappeared into dense mangrove. Valentina told me that her grandmother looked exactly the way she had imagined, and nothing like what she had expected. Tiny, brown, deep lines in her face like river channels on a map. But her eyes were young, sharp. She looked at Valentina for a long time without speaking. Then she said, in Spanish, though her accent was heavy, "Tienes su cara?" You have her face. They sat on the platform and talked. Or rather, her grandmother talked. She told Valentina about her mother as a child, how she was the best swimmer in the settlement, how she could hold her breath for 3 minutes, how she had a voice that carried across the water, how she was happy. And then she told Valentina why her mother left. Her mother started hearing something when she was 18, a voice from the water, at night, calling her name. Softly, from the dead channel behind the settlement, the same one where she would be found years later. Her grandmother said it had happened before, to other women in their family, going back generations. The voice came from the water. It called their name. It sounded like someone they loved, and eventually, if they listened long enough, they would go to the water, and the water would take them. Her grandmother called it La Llamada, the call. She said it was hereditary. It moved through the women in their family like a sickness passed through blood. Her grandmother's mother had heard it. Her grandmother's grandmother had heard it. Some had resisted, some had not. Valentina's mother had left the Delta to escape the call. She thought the distance would break it. She thought the city, with its noise and concrete and distance from the river, would drown it out. She was wrong. The call found her in Caracas, in her dreams at first, then in the sound of water running from the faucet, then in the rain. Valentina's grandmother said her mother came back to the Delta that final time, not to visit, but because the call had become unbearable. She came back because she couldn't not come back. The water was pulling her home. Valentina sat on that platform above the black water and listened to her grandmother describe how her mother died. Not drowned, not accidentally. She answered the call. She went to the dead channel. She looked down into the water, and she went in. That night, Valentina slept in a hammock on her grandmother's platform. The sounds of the Delta surrounded her. Frogs, insects, water against wood. She was exhausted. She fell asleep quickly. She woke up at what she estimated was the middle of the night. The settlement was dark. No radio, no voices, just the water and the frogs and the heavy, wet air of the Delta. She lay in her hammock, staring up at the thatch roof, and she felt something was wrong. It took her a moment to identify it. The water beneath the platform had stopped moving. The gentle rocking she had fallen asleep to, the slight sway of the hammock from the current pushing against the stilts, was gone. The platform was perfectly still, as if the house were no longer built over a river, but over solid ground, or over something that had chosen to stop moving. She looked at her grandmother's hammock. Her grandmother was awake, lying on her back, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Her grandmother whispered, very softly, without turning her head, "It knows you're here." Valentina felt her heart begin to pound. She opened her mouth to speak. Her grandmother raised one hand, slowly, and pressed a finger to her lips. Silence, absolute silence. And then, from below the platform, from the still, black water beneath them, Valentina heard a voice. It was singing a lullaby, soft, sweet, a melody Valentina recognized immediately, though she couldn't remember where she had learned it. A song from her childhood, from before her mother died. A song she hadn't heard in 24 years, but knew every note of, and the voice singing it was her mother's voice. Valentina's eyes filled with tears. Her entire body went rigid. The voice was perfect, the tone, the warmth, the way her mother would hold certain notes a fraction longer than necessary. It was not a copy. It was not an imitation. It was her mother's voice, rising from beneath the black water, singing her to sleep. She sat up in the hammock. She looked down through the gaps in the platform floor. The water was there, still, black, a mirror, and in the mirror, lit by the faintest starlight, she saw a face, her mother's face, looking up at her, from just below the surface, eyes open, mouth moving with the lullaby, her hair drifting slowly in the still water like dark seaweed. Her skin was the same warm brown that Valentina remembered. Her expression was gentle, loving, the face of a mother looking at her child for the first time in 24 years. Valentina told me she reached down, without thinking, the way you reach for someone you love. She stretched her fingers toward the water, toward that face, toward the gaps in the platform floor. Her grandmother's hand caught her wrist, hard, painful. No. One word. Her grandmother's grip was iron. She pulled Valentina's hand back up and held it against her own chest. The singing continued. The face remained. Valentina could see her mother's lips forming the words of the lullaby. She could see her mother's eyes, wide and dark and full of something that looked so much like love that it hurt to see it. Then the face did something that made Valentina stop breathing entirely. It blinked, and when the eyes opened again, they were wrong. They were the same eyes, the same shape, the same color, but the expression behind them had changed. The love was gone. What replaced it was something Valentina struggled to describe. She told me it was like watching a mask slip, just for a fraction of a second, and seeing what was actually underneath. Hunger. Not anger. Not malice. Hunger. The way something starving looks at food. The lullaby stopped mid-note. The face smiled, a wide, slow smile. Too wide. The corners of the mouth pulling back further than a human mouth should go. And then the face sank, slowly, gradually, straight down into the black water. The eyes were the last thing to disappear, still looking up, still smiling, sinking into the darkness until there was nothing but the flat, black surface of the water. The current came back, the platform swayed. The frogs, which had been silent, began to sing again. Her grandmother released her wrist. There were red marks where her fingers had been. Valentina was shaking. She couldn't speak. She lay back in the hammock and stared at the ceiling until dawn. In the morning, her grandmother told her two things. The first was this: what you saw was not your mother. Your mother is gone. What lives in the water wears her face the way a fisherman wears a hat. It is a tool, nothing more. The second was this: you heard the call last night. You reached for it. The fact that you heard it means it has already found you. It will follow you. Not in the water, in the sound of water, in the rain, in any still surface where you can see your own reflection. It will be patient. It will wait for you to be tired, or lonely, or missing her badly enough to forget what I told you. And when you answer it, when you look down one more time and reach for what you see, it will take you the way it took her. Valentina left the Delta that day. She flew back to Caracas. She told me she has done 3 things since that night. She covered every mirror in her apartment. She showers with the lights off so she cannot see the water pooling at her feet. And she has not looked at any body of still water, not a puddle, not a glass left overnight, not a swimming pool, in 4 years. She told me one more thing. She said that on quiet nights, when the city goes still and the air conditioning hums and there is nothing but silence in her apartment, she can hear it, very faintly, coming from the pipes, from inside the walls, from somewhere deep inside the plumbing of her building. Her mother's voice singing that same lullaby. She said it's getting louder. The Orinoco Delta covers 25,000 square kilometers. 8,000 years of people have lived above that water. They built their lives on stilts because they understood something that visitors never do. The water is not empty. It was never empty. Something lives below the surface, something old, something patient, something that knows your name and your mother's name, and her mother's name before that. The Warao don't try to understand it. They don't try to fight it. They follow the rules. Don't enter the dead channels. Don't look at the water when it goes still. And if you hear a voice calling your name from beneath the surface, remember the first lesson the Warao ever learned. The first voice is always death. Janet, if you've had a similar experience in these waters or anywhere else in the world, send me your story. The link is in the description. Sleep well tonight.